Hello, this is Success. How may I help you?
Welcome to the podcast, James. First off, I'd like you to introduce yourself and what exactly it is that you do.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Brisbane, Australia, so I'm a long way from home right now. I currently live in Los Angeles, California. And I basically, my most recent project was as author of Think and Grow Rich, The Legacy, which is a modern companion to Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, which many people might know as the best-selling self-help book of all time. And I was also a co-executive producer of the film. So we've got a film and a book out with that as well. But when I'm not focused on those projects, I help professionals and entrepreneurs take ownership of their financial, physical, and mental health.
Awesome. So my next question is, what exactly is your story? How did you get to where you are today, James?
Yeah, so again, I grew up in Australia, and then I spent 10 years in financial planning, and I love that, but I always felt the urge for something more, like there was just something different for me to tread my own path. So I ended up getting completely out of my comfort zone. And it's funny that sometimes you don't realize how much of a bubble that you're in until you're actually completely out of it. So I ended up moving to Boston in America. So from Brisbane to Boston is literally on the other side of the globe. Yeah. And I was doing a program over there that was 9 months in Boston and 3 months in Shanghai in China. So it was a really interesting period in my life. And it was at that time when I saw so many people who were my age and younger. So I was 28 at the time, who had their own businesses and they were doing all these entrepreneurial things. And I thought, that's my tribe. I want to be one of those people. And I don't know about you, but I love talking to people who have their own businesses or are working on their own ventures, because they have that different level of confidence. And yeah, so it's great. So then I ended up moving to LA after that, where have been involved in a number of different projects, and that's where I'm based right now.
Okay, awesome. So how did you come to getting to deciding that you wanted to work and create the book Think and Grow Rich, The Legacy?
Well, it's a good question. I had the opportunity to meet the filmmakers. So they had already started making this film. So they had obtained the rights from the Napoleon Hill Foundation, who continued to do all the work for Napoleon Hill, who was a prolific writer. So he had so many books, but never had his works become a film before. So the filmmakers had the rights to that. And then I met them and they said, hey, we love your energy. Tell us how you can be involved in the project. And at that stage, I had already written one book called The Beginner's Guide to Wealth that had come out in 2010. And basically I pitched them a concept and said, if I was you, this is what I would do to release a book with this movie. And they said, wow, we're blown away. Can you do it? And before you knew it, I found myself writing a modern companion to this truly inspiring book, this timeless classic that had not only changed my father's life, who was my age when I came on board this project, but it's changed the lives of hundreds of millions of people around the world. So it was a great honor, and I came on board to write that book, and then also as producer of the film at the same time.
Yeah, that's impressive. Was filming and getting involved with film and writing books something you initially thought that was something you wanted to do?
Film, definitely not. But I who doesn't love watching a good movie? So I always enjoyed movies and things growing up, because I just love that escape. If you're so busy and focused on doing your own things, just spending a couple of hours watching a film that completely transplants you into a completely different reality. So I have always enjoyed movies and things. I don't watch a huge amount of them these days because my wife's about to, she's 8.5 months pregnant, and there's a lot of other things happening right now. But so things are getting busier and busier, which is great. But I realized it was a big light bulb moment for me, because it really justified the opinion that I had held, although I wasn't 100% certain of it, that if you're a success in one area, that you can be a success in other areas. And because I didn't have a background in film, it meant that I actually had a lot of fresh ideas that I could add to this situation, that the filmmakers who had a lot more experience in that industry hadn't thought of. So it was actually a very good team, and I think people have been very happy with the final product of the film and the book. But writing is something that I've always done naturally. It's only once I went to university after high school that I took a professional course on writing, and that gave me the technical abilities. So anyone can be a great writer, but if you haven't got that technical expertise behind you, you're going to get found out pretty quickly by anyone who has even a mediocre knowledge of the technical aspects of writing. So it was at that point, but I've always been focused on learning from the whole editing process as well. So when I write something and it goes to an editor, I always like to read the comments and what they took out and just things like that, because I'm always I often talk about increasingly becoming a person of value, and I really love that opportunity to find out how I can improve. So the writing is something that I will continue to do until the day that I die. It's something that comes naturally to me, and I love it. But unfortunately, in the world that we live in, people like video and audio and things like that more. So I'm starting to start incorporating some of those things too.
Being someone who's personally dyslexic, like, I almost could never finish a book. Like, the only book that I'd ever read before was like Holes, up until maybe like 2 years ago. Before that, like, I would read like half of a book, but I get like extreme migraines through books. But like, then with my dyslexia, but like after I started reading like self-help books, like, I read one self-help book and I was surprised, like, I finished it, because like reading, it just gives me migraines, and normally like I'll blank out halfway through. But like, I think that self-help books are so good, and they help you get past and move past. And it's like, you listen to all of these people that are talking and putting out audio and podcasting, but like, it's not the same as like reading the book, because you pick up different, like, when somebody's talking about something, they're giving you their interpretation of what's written versus you forming your own interpretation after reading it.
Yeah, so true. It's why I like to, it's sometimes when you read a book and then you go and see a movie adaptation of that book, it's a big contradiction between the movie that you have made in your own mind. And I don't know what it is about being dyslexic in particular, but there are a lot of people in my book who are dyslexic. It seems to be, in many cases, the things that actually spur people on to greater success as well. So Errol Abramson, who's in my book, the Canadian billionaire, he read Think and Grow Rich when he was, I think, 16 years old, and within a few years he was a millionaire. So being dyslexic, you just need to find a way then that you can find a practical way to convert that. I use the word disadvantage, but it's not really a disadvantage if you can find a greater way to spur you onto success. So people like Lewis Howes and Barbara Corcoran and a whole heap of people have had a lot of similar things, but were able to channel their abilities into other things. And how have you found audiobooks and things as well?
So audiobooks are good, but for me, that's the other thing, that's like, I'll listen to audiobooks if they're fiction, but if it's not fiction, I feel like it's a lot of consumption of time of listening to somebody else. So that's the other thing, where now, like, I'm trying to, as much as like people are like, double down on your strengths, I want to strengthen like my muscle to read, my muscle to get that interpretation of the book, and just be able to do it on my own, so that I don't know, I just want to build up a stronger foundation in reading, so it's not something where I feel like lack of confidence. Because if somebody gave me a book, even if like I had my own book and I were to read it in front of a crowd, it wouldn't be something that I'm confident on. But if somebody were to give me the book and ask me to like explain it in front of people, it would be easier for me to do that rather than directly read from the book.
Yeah, it's such a great mindset to have, because there is so much knowledge in books as well, and anything in the self-help field. I actually prefer, I do enjoy audiobooks, but they're third on the list for me. I like the actual physical book first, because then I can sit there and take notes and I remember it more, and I love just seeing it and feeling it. Yes. And then ebooks are good, because then you can highlight passages that you can then export later. And then audiobooks are good for convenience as well. So there's pros and cons of each, but above all, you have got that mindset of wanting to constantly learn as much as you can, and that's 95% of the battle, because as Jim Rohn said, the book you don't read won't help you.
Yes. The other thing that you're talking about, touching and feeling it, that's another thing that's very, like, with me, I like to hold it. Like, I like to have the physical book, know, like, okay, if like my phone ever got like stolen or something got erased or for some reason the website went down, like I have my book, I have my notes in the book, and it's something that I can like work on, read, and if anybody like needed it, I could be like, okay, here you go, here it is.
Yeah, so true.
So my next question for you, James, is what do you think your biggest struggle was to, I guess, overcome and get into this place of self-development and come to writing, Think and Grow Rich and get out of, you said financial accounting, right?
Financial planning, yeah.
So planning. So what do you think, like, specifically triggered you to start trying to figure out how to get comfortable with being uncomfortable?
So I had a really good question. I had enormous issues with anxiety when I was young. So it seemed to, I don't know when it first started, but I remember it first starting for me just by my recollection around the ages of 15 and 16. So at high school, things around exams, I felt like the whole world was ending, and I would have these really bright lights and these hot flashes and often faint or need to leave the room. And then that happened through university as well, because I realized the only way that I could get through it was if I didn't care. So that was one thing. So at that point, all I was trying to do was just be like everybody else. And this anxiety stuff continued for me. The main thing that I realized was that it came on when I was in a situation where I felt like I couldn't escape from. So things like exams, where there's a lot on the line, because we tell high school students that you're either smart or stupid based on your response to this standardized test. And it's also what determines whether or not you're going to get into university. So the stakes are very, very high. And then how you perform in university determines the job that you're going to get as well. So it's a particularly perilous time for young adults, kids, whatever you want to say. But because I think at that point they don't have enough life experience or awareness around what's actually going on and how to deal with these feelings. And there was a big turning point for me when I was actually working at a liquor store part-time while I was at university, and I fainted and threw up and collapsed, and I basically said, I can't live like this anymore. And it was a conversation with my mum, of all people, which is just so bizarre. And I said to her I was going to find medication to get over this. Basically, the total sum of my desires at that point was to be normal, just like everyone else, where I could attend university without any issues. I could actually hold a job without any issues. And she said, you have everything you need right here, and tapped my head and my heart. And at that point, it just completely shifted things for me. And I thought that I am never going to live like this again. And that is when I just dove headfirst into everything I could find on success and psychology and performance. And I haven't stopped. And that's been about 13 or 14 years now. So the reason the Think and Grow Rich project happened was because since that point, I have been constantly focused on leveling up and leveling up. But those things around the anxiety was understanding the physiological symptoms and what was actually happening, and focusing on breathing and reading about performance and mindset and doing all these things and realizing what was possible for me and that there was still hope. And once you start to believe these things and start to have these little wins, then you realize how powerful that is, and you become addicted to that feeling of wanting to basically keep improving yourself. And that is what happened, and where I'm at today. So anyone who's listening right now who's going through a lot of this stuff, never accept temporary failure as permanent defeat. It's about the biggest lesson that you can have in the world.
Yeah. So this is just something based off of what you're saying, because I know this happens to myself when I'm listening or going on a self-development, reading a self-development book, and there's something particular that I want to work on. You talking about anxiety and mindset. What was something that like you told yourself to help yourself get over, like to realize, okay, this is what it actually is. This is kind of what I need to set up in my mind in order to overcome it.
Well, I actually printed out 2 quotes. So the first one was excellence is not an act, but a habit. We are what we repeatedly do. And just seeing that and having that up there on the wall in my bathroom. And the other quote was, life is not about finding yourself. It's about creating yourself. So having those reminders that I would see 15 times a day, as well as, actually, no, I initially had them in my workspace in my bedroom above my desk, and then I ended up moving them to my bathroom once I moved out of that, out of home. And, but in addition to that, it was the understanding around everything else. So healthy food, first of all. Previously, I was going out drinking and eating crappy food and spending all my money. So the importance of that cannot be overstated. So right now, I'm a very, very healthy person. I always make room and time for health and fitness and eating exceptionally cleanly. I rarely drink alcohol. I certainly don't smoke or do drugs or anything like that. Hanging around the right people, making sure you're not around these energy vampires and people who are negative and people who are putting you down or talking trash about other people. People are free to be negative, but just not around me. I'm just not gonna stand for it. Yeah. And then as a result of that, surrounding yourself with people who think big and want to give more of themselves to help other people succeed. And once you factor those elements in with your living and your working environment, where you look around and say, is this inspiring me? Yes or no? And if it's not, making changes until those two environments do inspire you, well, then you've got this snowball effect of moving on to these bigger and better things. So that is that journey, and then committing to, as you said, doing things like reading. So I still read every single day, and I think it's actually a great way to unwind before bed, because you're staring at a book that's going to calm your mind down rather than a phone that's going to constantly remind you of stress and frustration and look what this person has that I don't. So all those things together is what you could do. One of those things and they would make little improvements. They might not be sustainable, but doing it all together, but above all, planting that flag to say, this is who I am now, basically making the decision to engage with life and saying, come and get me.
Yeah. So my next question is kind of similar to what we were just talking about, but mindset. What is mindset to you, and how big of a deal do you think it has in people's lives?
Mindset to me is really basically an opinion of how you feel about yourself, but it's also the freedom of how you spend your days. It's having positive thoughts that come in as well. So that mindset piece is so important, but it's not something that you can switch. So you can make that decision to switch from the fixed to the growth mindset, but it needs to be reinforced with simple and consistent action. And I'm actually I just started a podcast recently, and I'm just writing a newsletter on that as well. And this is all about Rob Dyrdek, who's a TV host, and he's in my book as well. Right. And Rob Dyrdek had an amazing story, and what he was able to do around creating this detailed plan to achieve anything that you ever want. Because if you're doing all those elements that we spoke about earlier, like your living and working environment, looking after your physical and your mental health, hanging around the right people, that leads to positive thoughts. And positive thoughts enables you to conceive a clearer idea of what the future looks like for you. And the more you have a clearer idea, the easier it is for you to start to believe it. And when you believe it, it's so much easier to create these detailed plans. And once you've got these detailed plans, it's so much easier for you to take that action each and every day. So that's really the formula. But people get inspired on a whim and they want to take immediate action. But that frenzy of action is not sustainable. Rob Dyrdek said, I don't want to be great. I try to be consistently good. And an hour of planning can save you 10 hours of doing. So really thinking about what success looks like to you, start at the end and then work backwards. And once you're clear on those actions that you need to take today and tomorrow and the day after, that will inspire you. And being inspired is the number one productivity tip that you can have. Wow. When you're inspired, it doesn't matter how much sleep you've had. You get up and you are excited to crush it.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that I feel like I've lacked a little bit the last couple months due to college being a little bit busier and having a little bit less time doing reading and trying to focus more on pushing out content and stuff like that. But yeah, I think inspiration is the thing that like drives people at the end of the day, and feeding yourself constant inspiration rather than being motivated and just stopping. Yeah,
for sure. Like if you had Elon Musk scheduled on your podcast to be your guest in 1 month's time, I bet you would be incredibly inspired for the next month to get up and make sure everything is in the right place before you do that. So it's a matter of being clear around what that future looks like and what steps it's about being excited from each stage that's going to get there. So that's such a big. People really try and rush this whole process, and you need to get clear on what the perfect destination is, and then work backwards. It's so important.
Yeah. My next question is daily routines, daily habits. Habits help make a person. Do you have any daily routines or daily habits that you do when you wake up in the morning?
Yeah, so I wake up and I try and get out of bed as quickly as I can. Admittedly, I'm not great in the mornings. It's something that I'm always focused on and always trying to get better at. My wife is incredible in the morning. So she's now at 8.5 months pregnant. She's still up and she's ready to go, and she goes to work, and so that actually inspires me as well. But the moment I have a hot shower and a coffee, then I'm good for the entire day. But the big thing that I like to do is I start with the 5-minute journal. So I write down 3 things that I'm grateful for and 3 things that would make today a win, and then write down a positive affirmation. And funny thing about that is that's an actual book called the 5-minute journal that people can go and grab on Amazon. I use it almost every day. And those 3 things that you've written down that would make today a win, they nag away at you, and they don't always need to be related to your career. Maybe it's making dinner for your partner when they get home from work, or maybe it's doing the washing or a great gym session, or bringing a good energy to a podcast, or whatever it might be. And once you do those 3 things that would make today a win consistently, big things will start to happen in your life, because it's not these huge things that we need to do. It's just these small things that we're clear on. But so many people wake up and they don't know what work they're going to do today and how it relates to their long-term mission. So the 5-minute journal is just a great way to build a foundation and create your intent for the day. I actually recently started meditation, and previously I had used an app like Headspace, and I hated it, and I couldn't understand why everyone talks about how good Headspace and all these other apps are. And I spoke to a guy who's a psychologist for entrepreneurs specifically. So he works with Navy SEALs and a whole heap of other people. And he said the big difference is, for people like me and probably you too, when you close your eyes, your brain becomes this beehive, this frenzy of activity. But if you're meditating with your eyes open, then it's so much easier to neutralize that. It's actually a fairly detailed process. But so I get in this kneeling position, make sure it's very, very comfortable, and then I focus on a simple object with the whole goal of just being present. And a byproduct of that presence is relaxation and focus. So I've been really enjoying doing that. Eating clean. Eating annoys me because it takes time to prepare, time to eat, and time to clean. So I'm very, very big on meal prep and making sure you've got something ready to go, like a good healthy meal ready to go. I usually don't schedule any calls or podcasts or anything like that until the afternoon, because I keep those morning hours where I am most energized for high creative work. So whether it's a writing project or just any activities that are going to get me closer to my long-term goals.
Yeah.
And then in the afternoon, I 3 or 4 days a week, I'll schedule some type of gym session. And before that, I will do mobility or yoga, just something to just to basically get the whole body feeling limber, to reduce the risk of injury or anything like that. So that's pretty much my routine around how I can stay balanced and focused and get things done. But so much of that is also around scheduling your time properly. So right now I don't schedule more than 1 or 2 podcasts in a week, because I found that at the end of it I was fairly drained, especially for video podcasts. So if I'm scheduling them every single day, then I don't have any time for myself and the things that I need to focus on. And if I've got big goals of wanting to help a lot of people, I need to make sure I protect that mental energy as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you're reaching out and still helping other people as well, doing what you want to do, but you got to make sure you have enough energy for yourself and get down the things that you need to do.
That's right. And a big John Lee Dumas, who is from EO Fire, who a lot of people might know, that podcast. He's got more than 2,000 episodes now. He was very early into the podcast game. He's been killing it. And he's one of the people featured in my book. And he said that most people wake up and they want that feeling of accomplishment. So the easiest way to do that is to pick the low-hanging fruit, which is usually responding to emails. But if you reach the point where it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and all you've done for 5 or 6 hours work is just respond to emails, then you're going to be drained for your life's work. So you've enabled your busy work to overtake your life's work, and you don't gain traction on the most important things. But as we know, that things like email can actually be done on autopilot as well. You can do that later in the day.
Yeah. So my next thing is, James, in your industry, what would you recommend as like the number 3 tips for somebody in your industry?
What tips for what?
I'd say interviewing, writing, something along the lines. I feel like they're different, but they're similar enough to help, and maybe even self-development.
Yeah, for people who want to get into the self-development field. Sorry, do you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think the big thing that you need to do is figure out who you are first. Don't try and be someone else. And there's a big difference between trying to be someone else versus modeling success. So when you're clear on your values and where you want to go, you need to find people who inspire you, who are leaders in that field. So find out what they're doing, why they're a success. And a lot of people try and do everything themselves, and I was certainly guilty of that for many years. I wanted to, have this whole portfolio of all these different things, and I wanted to do the video editing and the graphic design and all this, everything, website stuff. But I've recently started outsourcing, so my web design has been outsourced for just over a year now. So it means I've got a great website, and it's a stress that I don't have to worry about. And I recently started outsourcing video editing and graphic design as well. And there's a lot of cheap ways that you can do that now through companies like Design Pickle and things like that. So doing that means that you get a professional product without the stress. And people think, well, it's actually costing me a lot of money. But if you added up that accumulation of your time and your stress, well, then I bet you it probably is worth only at the end of it to have a fairly amateur product, when you can get someone to do this in a way that looks great because you've modeled success and you know what works and what doesn't. I think that is such a really important piece of the puzzle. And then the big one is just getting out there and getting busy. So not sitting on your couch. Like, really, the biggest thing for me in my entire life has been through networking, through getting along with people and getting out there to meet people and figure out ways that you can unconditionally add value to others. And that means basically giving things to people without the expectation of anything in return. And so many people these days, they're trying to ram things down your throat, like, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. It's not about you, it's about them. It's about the people that you're helping. So figure out a way that you can add value unconditionally to these people. And once you do that properly, they're going to get excited about you and your mission and wanting to help you. But you need to get out there and increasingly become a person of value, because when you're doing that, that enables you to add more and more value to people who are higher and higher up the food chain. And once you get some pretty big hitters excited about you and what you're doing, then you're going to massively increase and amplify your results. But a lot of people are sitting in their apartments or in their houses, hiding behind a phone and getting pissed off at what everyone else is doing, when you need to get out there, stop comparing your day one to someone else's day 1,000, and just focus on simple and consistent action each day. And I've got so many resources on this as well. So if anyone wants to go and read this, like, my newsletter covers this primarily as well. So people can just go to my Instagram and click the link on bio, and there's a whole heap of things in there for people to help for free.
Yeah. Okay. That's awesome. So with this going on, what's something right now, James, that like you are extremely excited that you're working on that's coming up soon, or might be a little bit farther out from now, but like something you're really pumped that's coming out?
Oh, many things. This year is going to be pretty crazy. So on the personal front, the baby is due on April 19, so that's going to be a very big one. And then, but I've heard that the very first baby can sometimes be a little delayed, and I've actually got a speaking event on the 3rd and the 4th of May as well, which is the first stop on the Think and Grow Rich World Tour. So I don't know what will happen with all that, but we'll see. But this speaking tour is going to go all around the country. So I'm not doing all of the events because I don't want to be away from the baby for too long. But I'll be in New York and Atlanta and Houston and Yeah, Northern California, San Diego, LA. So a lot of these speaking events going on that I'm very excited about. And I've also got some other writing things happening too. Yeah, the podcast, this new YouTube show I've just launched. So yeah, a lot of things happening this year.
Okay, awesome. So the Think and Grow Rich tour, is that going all around the United States?
All over. So I won't be doing all the events, but you can go to tgrworldtour.com and that's got all of the dates. So yeah, Boston and all Dallas, everywhere. I think it's like 20 cities in the country. So for people who are a fan of Think and Grow Rich or want to be around some pretty impressive speakers, there's some really inspiring people attending each event. That it's definitely an event worth checking out. And if you use the promo code WINTHEDAY, just one word, win the day, no spaces, you get $200 off any ticket of your choice at any of those events as well. So yeah, for anyone watching, go and check it out.
Yeah, definitely. So continuing with financial planning, with working a 9-to-5 job, what made you initially realize that a 9-to-5 job wasn't for you?
I always had an issue being put into a box, so I don't know where that came from. I still have an issue being put into a box in any way, shape, or form. So I've always resisted roles that said that, hey, even when I was in financial planning, I had a whole heap of different roles. I was marketing manager, then business development manager, and then practice development manager. And they kept saying like, hey, we think you'd be a really good financial advisor. And I just wasn't happy with that. And I just felt that sometimes it's hard to argue with that instinct and that intuition. And it was only once I made that decision to move overseas that was proved right. But before I made that move, I was working on creating my own business because it was a big part of these people I interviewed for Think and Grow Rich, the legacy, that people who are very, very smart academically, what it does, it means that they evaluate risk too stringently, so they can think of too many reasons as to why they shouldn't act, to why they shouldn't have their own business or start a podcast or do whatever it is. But people who aren't as academically gifted, they're the ones who can think of one reason as to why they should act. And then they go all in, and doing so, they open themselves up to failure, but they learn very, very quickly and they become resilient. And that's what over time leads to extraordinary success. And I just felt that in that financial planning world that there was just a different calling. And now I know exactly what it is. So this is through this Think and Grow Rich, the Legacy Project. It was basically like the clouds parted and so I knew that this is what I wanted to do, and this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And it was 33 years old when I figured that out. Okay. So I had that big turning point at 23, but it was only when I was 33 that I realized that this is exactly my purpose. So you don't have to worry too much about defining that if you're going out there and reading as much as you can and meeting a lot of people and researching companies and industries that excite you, because the more knowledge that you have, the more solutions that you can offer to other people and the more help that you can give them.
Yeah. What was your favorite interview, do you think? What do you think was like maybe your favorite person to talk to, and then what do you think was your favorite interview where your lesson was learned? Good question. They were all great, and there were so many amazing ones in there, like Janine Shepherd, who was hit by a truck. She's an Aussie and now a very close friend of mine as well. Yeah. So there are people in the project who have become very close friends of mine, like Janine Shepherd, John Shin, Brandon Adams, David Meltzer. There are other ones like Barbara Corcoran and Grant Cardone and Bob Proctor, where it's like, wow, and Rob Deerdeck, where it's like, cool, I'm sitting down with these people and it's a pretty amazing feeling. Yeah. But then there were people like Napoleon Hill's grandson and his story as well. It just blew me away. So many different people for so many different reasons. But I think people like Janine Shepherd, who was hit by a truck, and Jim Stovall, who was told at the age of 17 that he would go totally and permanently blind, which he did, and then went on to be the author of 30 best-selling books. I mean, you hear these stories and it's just, it made me deeply empathetic to things that people go through, and that is why gratitude is such a big part of my life
now as well. And I feel like we all have an obligation, not just to ourselves or to our partners, but to our families and our communities and to the world, to really unlock our potential. So that was really the biggest thing for me.
Yeah. So James, what is your number one dream, your number one goal? Like before James leaves this earth, what does he want to accomplish?
Oh, too many things. I've got a whole, I've got seriously a pretty serious, it looks like an encyclopedia of goals and things that I want to accomplish. But the big one for me is just in the next 12 months, I want to help 1 million people take ownership of their financial, physical, and mental health. So I'm using the podcast and the video channel and the book and the film and the newsletter, and by coming on podcasts and things like this as well, just to be able to spread the word. So that's my big focus right now. But above all, I just want to help people realize that everything they need to succeed is already within their possession. Because in a world that we live in right now, where everyone's trying to tell you that you are not enough, I'm here saying that you are enough. All we need to do is just figure out the right tips and strategies that's going to help you get everything that you want. And that all starts with a very clear definition of what it actually is that you want in the first place.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. It's good. That's one thing that I've been thinking about recently is like we have a lot of people that are negative on social media, but like I only see the positives the last couple months because I'm only following people that are pushing out positivity. And with the news and everything, I feel like even though we have some big media companies that are positive, like not huge, but like Gary and Napoleon Hill Foundation that has like their own media stuff, I feel like there needs to be like another company that's big enough that not that they're delusional where they don't report things that are actually happening in the world, but it's so that the late night segment isn't just about the murder on the street, but it's about the person that donated a ton of money or the kid that raised a bunch of money for a foundation. I feel like that's something that like we need to work on.
It's so true. And there was a big process I went through about 6 months ago where I looked at my news feed on Facebook for about a week, and I unfollowed and unliked pages and people that just didn't, that wasn't positive and didn't inspire me. And we've all got those people on our Facebook page that the only time they post something is when they're bitching about something else. And God, it used to, like, what is wrong with these people? Like, open your eyes and look at the world that you live in. And I'm exactly the same. I like just being surrounded by that positive energy. It makes such a big difference to your own mindset literally on a daily basis.
It really does. So with all of these people that you've interviewed, with going through anxiety, and you kind of talked about some quotes that you went through, but like, James, what do you think your number one piece of life advice would be for somebody?
Probably each day, if you do not make the decision to win, you have automatically made the decision to lose. So if you look at your average person, the difference between living with intent versus someone who reacts to each day. So most people wake up when their alarm goes off and they complain about their alarm going off, and then they drive to work and they complain about the traffic, and then they get to work and complain about their boss and the work they have to do. Then they complain on the commute on the way home, and then when their partner asks them how their day was, they complain about it, and they go to bed, and all they've accomplished is a whole lot of complaining. But if you wake up and you with intent and you know what actions you're going to do today and how they relate to your long-term mission, then naturally you're just moving. Like, these people are worlds apart over time. So each day, if you do not make the decision to win, you have automatically made the decision to lose. Because if you don't live with intent, it's our human nature that we're going to want to do that which is easy, and we're going to fall victim to procrastination and distraction as well. So each day, make the decision to win.
So my last thing for you, James, is anything that you want to shout out, any social media, anything for Think and Grow Rich, your personal pages, anything like that.
You can get links to all that stuff on my Instagram's probably the best spot. So James Whitt, JamesWhitt. Come and say hi. I've got a whole heap of things in that link in the bio as well. So go and check it out.
All right, awesome. I'm going to stop the interview for a second, stop recording.